All right, everyone, welcome back. This is episode 2 of Hardwood Homies NBA Draft Show. I'm Jackson Hoy. I got Cesar Smokowski on the other line. How's it going, Cesar?
Hey, what's up, Jackson? Thanks for having me back. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're gonna have a fascinating show, so should be exciting. Let's get into it, man.
Yeah, today we're talking second round prospects. We've got 10 guys that we think are better than second rounders. Or maybe we don't agree on all of them. So we're going to talk about each guy and we'll hear what each of us has to say. We'll talk about these guys, give you some in-depth scouting on all of them. I've done film breakdown. I've looked at all these guys, strengths, weaknesses, that sort of thing. So, yeah, let's get into it. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, should be exciting. Got a good crop of guys.
Before we get started, I want to remind everyone to give us a review on iTunes. We love to hear what you have to say. We love to hear constructive criticism, whether you liked it, that sort of thing. Yeah, but please just go drop a review after you listen. Really helps us. It's great to have. So, all right, guess we can get started. So, first off, the first guy I wanted to talk about was Wesley Iwundu from Kansas State. He is 22.3 years old, 6'7", 205 pounds, and his wingspan. Not sure on the exact measurement for it, but I think it's like 6'9", something like that. So he's got pretty good measurables. I see him as a shooting guard, small forward, maybe even a little power forward in the NBA. I like him a lot.
Yeah, he sounds like a really good guy. What attracted you to him so much, Jackson?
Um, well, when I was watching him, there's two things that really stood out for me. First off, his physical profile was really good. He's a really good athlete, along with being a big guy with long arms. But he also handles the ball well, and he moves around extremely well for a guy as big as he is. And his jumper has gotten a lot better. Last season at Kansas State, his senior year, his jumper was a lot better. Last season, he was shooting, I think, 39% from three, up from around 29% the past few seasons, and his mechanics had definitely improved. And then on the defensive end, he's got a lot of good effort level. One of the games I was watching him, he was going up against Josh Jackson in Kansas, and he played really well in that game, playing hard against Josh Jackson. And he's just a really smart passer out of the pick and roll, which was something I really like to see for a guy who can play on the wing.
That sounds all good. And the one thing that really fascinated me about him was how integral he was to that K State team because they really turned it around with behind his efforts, and he was a really big part of why that team won and was able to see some success. So yeah, that he's certainly a really great physical specimen and had a lot of great physical and tools to make it to the next level. Yeah, he looked like a really good guy at K State.
Yeah, and the thing that I liked about him going forward is the things that he needs to improve are things that are not that hard to improve. It's strength around the rim and on defense, which that's something that an NBA trainer can get you improved on. And then it's also some IQ stuff, which he's already got the body on defense to be a successful player. It's just his IQ catching up with his body. So I think he's going to be a long time starter in this league. I think he just has all the tools, and he's a really good player. He can do a lot of things, and he's versatile. So I think that that's going to end up boding well for him.
Yeah, the one concern I had about Awundu was, like at K-State, he looked sort of like a fairly, limited offensive player. Like he wasn't as active as, I would have thought he would be. Do you think that he'll sort of blossom at the next level, Jackson, or how do you see his offensive progressions going?
I see him as sort of a unique offensive player. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to do a whole lot scoring inside the arc, but I think his upside on offense is that he can be a guy who can catch and shoot around the perimeter, and then also make plays in drive and kick situations. I mean, he runs the pick and roll really well for a guy who's 6'7", which was good to see. He's a really smart passer. He can hit guys in the corner. So I think those two things are what he's going to be asked to do on offense in the NBA.
Makes sense. Yeah, that'd be a really good pick in the second round. Who do you think that he would fit well in the system, and who would he be a good second round pick with?
Well, I think the good news with a guy like him is, given his versatility, I think there's a lot of teams where he could fit, and I think a lot of teams would be lucky to have him on their team just because he can slot in so easily into so many different systems.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, he's certainly an interesting guy coming out of K State.
Yeah, Our next guy, we got DJ Wilson from Michigan. You want to talk about him some?
Yeah, man. DJ Wilson, a big man from Michigan. He is a 21-year-old power forward from, of course, Michigan. He came into this came into college a very under the radar player. He was ranked 159th in his class. So he was obviously went way below everybody's radar at that point, but he's certainly shined in Michigan. For his freshman year, is mainly hurt. He suffered a nearly season-ending knee injury and was only able to play about 5 minutes per game on average. But in his sophomore season, he's really blossomed.
Redshirt sophomore.
Now that he's been able to have some more consistency, he's really elevated that Michigan team. And in his two tournament wins, he showed that he is one of those rare big men who can block shots and is really good around the net. He can also is a very good rebounder, and he can stretch the floor as a shooter. So
I'm gonna argue.
Showed some potential.
I'm going to argue with you about one of the things you said. I do not think he's a good rebounder at all. He only averaged about 5 rebounds a game this year. His rebounding percentage, I think, was only 11 or 12%. So that was the biggest thing I noticed in his game that was kind of turning me the wrong way, was he's not a good rebounder. But yeah, a lot of those things you said about shot blocking and being able to shoot from outside, I really liked watching him.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's probably some of that a cause of that he wasn't a great rebounder in college. It was sort of he probably wasn't as athletic or didn't have the same bounce even a season after his knee injury, or he wasn't fully recovered.
Well, he's had two
lose that spring, but I think that he has the body, and he's certainly a big dude at 6'10" and weighing almost 245. So
yeah.
I think he has the body. If you work on it, he can develop into an excellent rebounder. So
he's got the 7'3" wingspan too, which is nice. I don't think it's necessarily the issue with him being able to jump. I think it's more another issue I have with his game is he just kind of shies away from physicality a lot. You see him around the rim when he's finishing. Instead of going into guys, he'll turn around and put up a jump hook instead, which is something you don't like to see. You like to see a guy who's 6'10", going into guys, finishing around the rim. But I do think he has a lot in his game that I like. I've got him slotted in the middle of the first round. I know a lot of people. Some have a first round grade on him, but some of the draft guys have him early second, which is why we put him in here. But yeah, I like a lot of what he does.
Yeah, I think he's interesting. I mean, I guess the main point, you were talking about, of course, his sort of, shying away from, banging in the inside and having, the physicality to get rebounds, And I guess the other only point, to worry about is sort of his consistency, because in a lot of the 35 starts that he had at Michigan, he sort of went in and out of being, sort of in tune to the game. So he sort of had that touch of inconsistency in the two seasons. But I think that when he was on, he was really on. Like in Michigan's 2 wins in the tournament, I think he was a big part of that, and he showed that he can be one of those instrumental guys on that team. So yeah, I think it'd be a great value in the second round.
Yeah, if he's in the second round, I think he'd be a great pick there. I don't know if he'll make it there, but I like him a lot.
Yeah, he was certainly a big factor in that. So it'll be interesting to see how talent evaluators see him, and able to judge his upside versus the small faults in his game. So yeah, I think that will be quite fascinating.
Yeah, on to our next guy, Jonathan Jean from France. I believe that's how you say it. He's a guy who, when I was scouting him, I was really blown away with what I saw from him. A lot of people have compared him to Rudy Gobert, which I think is really lazy. He's 7'2" with a 7'7" wingspan, just 210 pounds. He's really skinny, but he's only 19 years old. He'll be 20 in a couple months. The reason I said the Rudy Gobert comparison is lazy is because, I'll get into it, Jonathan Jean, he moves really well for a guy his size. I mean, watching him in transition and watching him be able to guard guys on the perimeter in the pick and roll was something that I saw from him, and I was really, really impressed with watching him do that. He moves out on the perimeter. I haven't seen many 7'2" guys who can move around with guards like that. He's already a really good shot blocker. I think he averages 5 blocks per 40 minutes this season in Europe. And on offense, he has a lot. He has this nice blossoming game where he's got a little bit of perimeter game. He's got a nice jumper developing. He can handle the ball a little bit, and I just really like him because he plays hard, and he's a really good asset as a switch defender. And the guy I was going to compare him to, it's not Rudy Gobert, it's Thon Maker. He reminded me a lot of Thon Maker when I was watching his tape, just seeing how he can move around out on the perimeter and be a guy who's that huge, and then that offensive upside that you see. I mean, he has to add a ton of strength because, I mean, 7'2" and 210 pounds, that's not sustainable, but he's got a lot of upside, I think.
Yeah, yeah. You talk about the man is super long, and he seems like he has a really good frame. He's very solid. Yeah, and I think that that Maker comparison makes a lot of sense. You talk about a guy who's big, very long, and has a great fit. Physical presence, but also can move out to the 3-point line and make open shots.
Yeah, and
I
also
think that
stay with
he
guards
really
out there. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that he really was like a breakout season for him, and I think that he did a lot of great things in France. Yeah, and you talk about being that young, you have guys that you can develop, and you get them young, and then you have all that upside, so you can just sort of take them from there. So yeah, I think that that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, him being 19 is just really nice because you can get him on your team and you have a couple years where you don't need him to be playing, or you can stash him in France for a couple more years and see how he develops. But I think it'd be better for an NBA team to try to get their hands on him, get their strength coaches with him, and get him to put on. He probably needs to add 40, 50 pounds, honestly. But if he can do that, then he's going to be a real asset because the way he moves out on the perimeter, I mean, you look at the impact Thon Maker's been able to have, even as a rookie with Milwaukee, simply because he's able to move around and stick with guards on the perimeter on defense. There was that highlight going around Twitter where he switched on to Kyle Lowry, and he was step for step with Kyle Lowry to the rim and forced him to take a bad shot, which was everyone was like, wow, that's amazing. That's the type of defensive potential Jonathan Jean has right away. So I was really excited watching him.
Yeah, I think that he certainly is a defensive mastermind. He could come in the league. My one big concern with him, playing international, he only shot 58% from the free throw line in 38 games. And I've seen some games from him, and I think he has some potential with his shot. But sometimes his jumper, looks sort of out of funk. So do you see that his free throw percentage and and that is a weakness in his game, or
I
do you think
think
that that'll develop?
I think the jumper's still a long way off for him. I think what I've seen is really it's this thing where you see a little flash of it, but before it's anything real, it's going to be a few years down the road, I think. But it's just a look into his offensive potential that he can be more than just a guy who dunks stuff around the rim.
Exactly. Makes sense.
Yeah. Our next guy is Monte Morris, point guard from Iowa State. You want to get into him?
Yeah, man, Monte Morris. Monte Morris was the guy and the leader of one of the best offenses in college basketball at Iowa.
Iowa
He
State.
led he led them to the 12th ranked offense, which is pretty good since they didn't have as much personnel as other teams on offense. But I think he played a huge role on that team, and he showed a great potential in as a passer and as a stealer in the tournament at Iowa State in those games. He showed that he can be a great facilitator, and he was certainly a great presence on the defensive, getting steals along with assists and points on the other end. So he has great size and speed for a NBA point guard as a backup point guard or eventually as a starter. And I think that he showed that what he lacks in bulk. He's not a huge, bulky guy like Markel Fultz or De'Aaron Fox, but he showed that he has a really high basketball IQ, and he's a great passer, and he has great abilities to get his other players on his team involved like he did in Iowa, and then also being able to make plays on the defensive end and get other people off their game. So
Yeah,
I really liked what he did at Iowa, and I think that
Iowa
he
State.
if he develops his size and bulks up a little bit, I think that he has a lot of potential.
Yeah, it's usually these backup point guard type prospects who are successful in college. They're a year older than Monte Morris and they're 3 inches shorter, so he has that going for him. He's still only 21 and he's 6'3", which is good. He's the NCAA all-time leader, I think, in assist-to-turnover percentage. That's been the big stat for him all through his college career, which, looking for a pure point guard, that's kind of out of vogue in the NBA, but teams still appreciate that. That's a really good thing to see from Morris. And then his shot isn't phenomenal. I think he shot 38% from three, and it's got a little weird hitch in his feet when he shoots, but I still think that he's got a good jumper that can serve him well in the NBA. I think his role on offense is going to be a facilitator and shooter. He's not explosive in the lane, and he doesn't really have a lot of skill around the lane. He's got a nice floater game. There was a game against Texas. He got a lot of floaters off over Jared Allen, but he doesn't have a great explosive around the rim game on offense. And then his defense, you mentioned he gets a lot of steals, but I think his defensive upside against NBA guards is sort of limited just because he's not a phenomenal athlete and he doesn't have phenomenal length. So I think Morris, I like him because he's a guy who you know what you're getting. You know you're going to get a guy who you can play at point guard and he can be useful, but I don't know if he has a ton of upside as a long-term starter.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that probably some of his weaknesses, in driving to the lane and, absorbing contact like that, I think that he has good size, at 6'3", and he has a decent wingspan. I think that, it's mainly because, he has a 175-pound frame, which is pretty small. He's a very scrawny guy. So I think that, if he gets stronger and works on his speed, I think that those parts are very, improvable, and you can certainly build on that. I think that his ability to take care of the basketball and be a good facilitator, and of course, as you're saying, that he has a decent shot. I think that those things, those sort of intangible things, are certainly a good thing as he can develop and certainly has the potential to be someone special. But you have to certainly put in the work and to build him up, build up his strength, build up his speed to have him turn that corner on the next level.
Yeah, I like him I think he'll find a spot in the NBA and be successful. Next is on to Cameron Oliver, power forward from Nevada. He's a guy, if you've listened to our earlier podcasts over on SoundCloud, I'm a big fan of Cameron Oliver. I have him in the top 20 on my board, actually, but a lot of people have him going in the 40s in this year's draft, but I really like what Cameron Oliver does as a shot blocker and as a shooter. He's 6'8" with a wingspan that's longer than that. He doesn't have an official wingspan measurement, but it's definitely got to be close to 7 foot. He's 225 pounds and he's 20 years old. He'll be 21 by the time next season starts. Two things I really like for him. He's a really good shooter who's confident and he gets his three ball off quickly. And he's an amazing shot blocker. He was one of the best shot blockers in the NCAA last year. He just gets up. He's a really explosive athlete. You can see it in transition on offense and around the rim on defense. And he's got a developing off-the-dribble game too. He's not quite ready to attack closeouts yet, but he definitely has the ability to at least get a couple dribbles off, get into the lane a little bit. A couple things with him that are a bit weaknesses. He's only 6'8", which is only average size for a power forward, and he doesn't get to the line, and his basketball IQ stands to improve. But the good news for him is a lot of the flaws with him are the basketball IQ, the polish things, which are, again, those things that you can teach at the NBA level. You can't teach elite shot blocking instincts and length, and then also that three-point shooting for him is really awesome. Like, he's a really, really good three-point shooter. He has good mechanics on his shot, and he gets it off quickly. So those are the two things I really like about him.
Yeah, I think that he's certainly quite an interesting prospect. You're talking about a guy, Oliver certainly has a strong frame, and he has physical tools that he certainly utilizes as a great shot blocker, and he certainly has a presence on the defensive end. And I think that if he can, build on his strength as a three-point shooter and continue to develop that, I think that he can be a really great guy in a system and can have a defensive impact that's huge, and also be able to hold his own on the offensive side. So yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, he's got a lot going for him. I think the two things that he needs to work on are developing that off the dribble game to where he can kick to other guys, and then also just again get smarter. His free throw percentage is still in the 60s, which is something you'd like to see improve, especially because he's got such a nice stroke from the perimeter. And then he needs to get to the free throw line more. I think a lot of what happens when he gets in traffic is he kind of decides to kick out, or he doesn't quite finish into guys, which he needs to be more physical because he's got all the tools to be a really good athlete, kind of a wrecking ball around the rim almost. So I think he needs to be a little bit more physical. But yeah, he's got a lot there. He's got a lot of tools that I think a team could really mold.
Yeah. I think that if you teach him, how, and you're able to develop his presence inside and being able to, draw fouls instead of kicking out and absorb contact. I think that he could be a really good guy. I think he has, great size. Being able to shot block at only 6'8", I think that that's a really great, attribute, and having that those great defensive instincts. I think that that's one of his biggest, positives. I think that that's one of the best, characteristics, and I think that that'll bring him and cement his place in the NBA. So I think that that'll be quite fascinating, and I really like that Nevada team. I think that he was, a really incredible piece on that team, and they did big things. So I'm glad for him.
Yeah, definitely. Next up, Sterling Brown from SMU, another guy that I talked about at a lot of length on a SoundCloud podcast for us. But we'll talk about him on here again. I'm a huge fan of Sterling Brown. A lot of people don't even like Chad. He's not in Chad Ford's top 100. He wasn't in the Draft Express top 100 for a while, but I just recently noticed he snuck up to, I think, number 63 on their top 100 prospects. So I think people are starting to take notice of him. But Hardwood Homies was the first ones on Sterling Brown, or at least that I'd heard. So
breaking news.
Yeah, we love Sterling Brown. 6'5", 6'9.5" wingspan, 225 pounds, 22 years old, out of SMU. He's an extremely talented shooter off the dribble or off the catch. On 284 career three-point attempts at the college level, he shot 45%. He's a really explosive athlete in transition. If you remember, Shannon Brown from Michigan State came out of the draft about 10 years ago. He was a big-time dunker. That's Sterling's older brother. He's comfortable bringing the ball up. He averaged 3 assists a game while he was at SMU. This past season, I think he had an assist percentage of like 17%, which is really good for a shooting guard. Looking at his shot, he has a really beautiful shot, and he can get it off with a hand in his face with length in front of him. He's got a really good shot. And then his on defense is a place where I really, really like what he does, because he was 10th in the nation in defensive win shares this season, which is pretty incredible. I mean, those value stats don't tell the whole story, but you watch tape on him, and he slides his feet. He's strong. He's aggressive on defense. And, again, back to the passing, he's a really smart passer in drive and kick situations. SMU this season was a really fun team to watch because all the guys out there were really good passers, and they played really smart, and they could all shoot. So when one of those guys got into the lane, they could drive and kick, which is a really key skill in the NBA. And then in help defense, he's really aggressive, and he does utilize his length. He's got that 6'9.5" wingspan. And then he finishes through contact around the rim. And, I mean, when I was looking at his weaknesses, there's not a whole lot that stands out to me. He didn't get many games against a lot of true NBA wings because he was playing the AAC, but that's not the worst competition you can get. And the shooting and defense, those are things that are going to show up against any competition. I mean, I think he's got as much claim as anyone as the best shooter in the draft, honestly. You look at his free throw percentage, you look at his three-point percentage and consistency. I was just blown away watching him shoot, especially because of how well he gets it off the dribble. He's not the most explosive guy in traffic, which could hamper him as a finisher in traffic at the NBA level. And sometimes he can disappear on offense, and then sometimes on defense he'll get caught reaching instead of sliding his feet. And he's already 22, so that somewhat limits his upside if you're one of those people who believes that age limits upside. But I really think that he can step in right away and be a 3-and-D guy, be a really impressive prospect. There's so much I love about his game, and I'm really surprised he's been this overlooked.
Yeah, man, both of us were very hot on Sterling, and I think that he's really shown other people that he can be, a solid NBA guy. And of course, you're talking about his 3-point potential and his crazy lockdown defense. I think that both of those are huge assets, and I really love that SMU team. I think that they were a really fun team to watch because you have guys that are dynamic playmakers and can pass the ball really well to other guys. You can spread the wealth. So, and I think that he was a great defensive presence, and you talk about being able to lock down guys on the next level. I think that he certainly has all those assets. So yeah, I think that he's rising the ranks, and we broke it first. Let everybody know.
Yeah, he and Shemi Ojale, his teammate from SMU, I'm huge fans of both of them. I think both those guys are going to be really good NBA players. Our next guy is Dwayne Bacon. I'm going to let you talk about him because I don't think we agree on this one, but I'll let you start with Dwayne Bacon.
Well, all right. Dwayne Bacon is a 6'5" shooting forward. Anyway, he's just a smidge over 200 pounds. And Dwayne Bacon it was a wiry and long guard at Florida. And
Florida State.
Florida State, sorry. He was one of those wiry, long guards at Florida State, and he was a great complementing piece to Jonathan Isaac on that team. The two worked really well. Dwayne Bacon at Florida State showed a lot of offensive potential. He's a terrific finisher in the lane.
Mm-hmm.
He can finish around the rim really well and gets into the lane when he wants and whenever he wants. And he played really well in Florida State's games. I think he's improved his jump shot over his high school career, and of course has improved it at Florida State. And as I was talking about, he's a great player in traffic, along with being able to improve his jump shot. So he was a great compliment to Jonathan Isaac, who's of course another a huge big body, and I think that he showed that he can carry an offensive load, and was as I was saying, a great guy that can get into the lane whenever he wants. He was able to absorb contact really well. He played above the rim and was able to finish all of his shots inside really well when you're looking at tape. And you're talking about on the defensive end, he was athletic enough to stick with just about any player on the perimeter. That's why that Florida State defense was so great with him and Isaac. He was able to keep up with all of the athletic guys on the perimeter that he was chasing after, and he matched them step for step. So I think that if you pair his offensive potential at 6'5", of course, he's not a huge guy, but I think that he certainly showed his quickness and athleticism, and at Florida State getting into the lane and making plays on the offensive side, and then on the defensive side, being able to keep up with nearly everybody in the nation on the perimeter, and being able to show his athleticism on the other side. I think he's pretty high with me. I liked him a lot. I think that you give him even more workload, I think that he's happy to take it.
Yeah, with Bacon, I agree with what you're saying about him as a finisher. I was really impressed with his ability in the lane, and he's got that 6'9.5" wingspan. He's a really strong guy too, that's been in vogue in the league in the last couple of years. Especially you look at Miami, all their strong wings, how successful those guys were. But I think his defense is where I disagree with you most. I don't think he was a very good defender. Looking at advanced stats for Florida State, he ranked 9th in defensive rating on the team, and out of their guys who were really in their rotation, there was only a couple guys who were worse than him in defensive rating. Defensive box plus minus, he was basically last out of their guys who actually played. So yeah, the value stats weren't very high on him. And then on top of that, I was watching some of his tape from against Duke, and I mean, Duke's got those NBA wings. So that's why I was watching that game, to see how he'd fare against NBA caliber wings. And he doesn't really use his athleticism on that defensive end. He doesn't have very good lateral quickness. I mean, he was getting beat by Matt Jones off the dribble, and when he gets beat, he just quits. There was a play I was watching where Jason Tatum kind of drove past him a couple steps before the basket, and he just stopped and let Tatum go straight to the rim. And I think he's also got poor off-ball awareness. He loses cutters a lot. He loses help around the rim. So I'm just worried about him on defense. The tape and the stats don't like him, and then also His 3-point shot is only decent. I like I like his form. It's got high arc on it, but on the season he was really boom or bust as a shooter. Like he had a game against Virginia Tech, came out and shot 6 for 9 from three, but then he had other games where he was going 2 for 7, 2 for 8. So I think he's got to nail down consistency on that 3-point shot and be smarter and have higher effort level on defense to really be a successful player.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I was talking about his strength, and yeah, I mean, I understand his weaknesses. That's why he's in the second round. I think he needs. He seems like he has good physical skills and shows effort, but I think he needs to be able to develop his understanding of basketball and the plays that the other team is running on the defensive side. I think that as you're talking about, he may not at this point show all the athleticism that he has on the defensive side, but I think that that's something that you can of course work on if you're developing him. I just think that his advantages, being able to get into the lane and create his own shot in that way, I think that that's a huge upside. Of course, you do need to put in some elbow grease into improving his understanding and improving his effort on the defensive side. So, of course, that's something you need to consider. But, I think that he has one of those rare abilities to be able to get into the lane and finish in traffic and, work above the rim, of course. And I think that his shot will develop over time. He looked like he has a sweet, swish with it. So I think that he has a lot of upside. You just need to, put some polish on him.
Yeah, if he were 2 years younger, I'd like him a lot more. He'll be 22 before next season starts. If he were 19 right now instead of 21, I think I'd be a lot higher on him. But I'm not ready to put a first round grade on him yet like I am with some of these other guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I think that being 22, I think that showed he certainly has doesn't have age on his side, but I think that from what he's shown that he's developed in his time in college. So I think that if you take him, you understand that you get a guy that has experience, but that you just need to work on a little bit more. So I think that he does have potential, but of course, as you're talking about, you need a he needs to flourish in the right area. So
Yeah. Next up, I got the Latvian center, Anzej Pasekniks. I probably butchered that, but he played for Gran Canaria this season in the ACB, I believe. And I'm really a huge fan of his game. I love a lot of what Paseknik does. He is 21.3 years old, 7'2", 229 pounds, and he's got good wingspan too. Don't have an exact measurement on it, but he's a really good athlete. He runs the floor in transition really well. He's explosive around the rim, which is good to see. He doesn't he's not slow or sluggish around the rim. He gets up and dunks a lot of the time. One other thing that I noticed, kind of a small thing, but when he's running in the pick and roll, he catches the ball high and he keeps it high, which is just really good to see. And also, he has a nice developing perimeter game, kind of like Jonathan Jean, where he's got some ball handling skills and got some shooting skills that you can sort of see blossoming. And one thing that's been huge with centers in the past few years is seeing how they have touch around the rim, because it's allowed guys like Nikola Jokic and Ivica Zubac to succeed as scorers around the rim. Pasekniks has really good touch around the rim. And then on defense, I like his mobility a lot. I mean, you combine that with his size and his length, his ability to be mobile and get out on the perimeter, switch on to guys. That's really good to see. But he's got very poor free throw shooting, which is kind of a big red flag for him. I think he's in the 50s. And then he needs to add a lot of strength. He gets pushed around on defense, on offense, on rebounds, and he needs to get smarter. But again, it's that same sort of thing where I feel like NBA teams can sort out the strength and the IQ with guys, and with the guys who have the mobility, who have those skill sets like Paseknis, I think that you take those guys and you hope you can work out the other stuff, because those tools are harder to find than it is to find a guy who's strong and who can be smart on defense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that he showed a lot of, he was a late bloomer, of course, but I think in the European League, I think that he showed a lot of, his skill set and why he, would transition well to the NBA. my only concern with them was, as you were talking about, he's a very thin guy. For a guy that's 6'10", he
7'2".
seemed to get what?
7'2".
Oh, 7'2", sorry. He seemed to get pushed around, a lot when he was, when he was absorbing contact. So I think that if you're able to develop him, get him in the weight room, get his body more NBA ready to, work around big guys. I think that his biggest attribute and his biggest positive is he worked really well in pick and rolls and was able to move off of screens and moved without the basketball well. I think that if you get him better conditioning and get him in with a stronger body, fill out his frame more, I think that he could be a really good guy. Of course, he has good size at 7'2", so yeah, once you develop him, of course he's very young, so I think that would be a really good pick.
Yeah, his mobility, his pick and roll game, his potential as a rim protector, although he has a lot of it to realize still. I think all of that should have him slotted in the first round. I think some of the smarter drafts people are coming around on him, but I think some people are still behind and they've got him in their second round. But I think hopefully he'll end up sliding into the first round by the time draft comes around.
Now, do you see him in that sort of first tier, international players with, Nitilakina and Isaiah Hardenstein? Is he in that level yet for you, or is he, is sort of outside of
I
that?
think he's in my
one of those guys?
I think he's in my second tier. I don't think he's quite up with those guys just because he's a little older. He's 21, and he's got a few more question marks than those guys, but I do like a lot of what he does.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think that he is part of a strong, international core. So I think that he can transition well into the NBA. He's got great size, yeah, as you're talking about. So he should, I think, fare well. And if he climbs into the first round, good for him.
Yeah. Next guy, you picked Thomas Bryant as a guy you liked. I'm gonna disagree with you on this one, but I'll let you go first on him.
All right, well, Thomas Bryant was a 19-year-old 6'10" center from Indiana. He was supposed to be a first-round pick or close to it last year, but he came back to Indiana to improve his stock, I guess, and refine his skills. He has incredible strength and size, standing at 6'10", with a 7'5" wingspan, which is very impressive, and it has a big muscular frame at 241. So I think that he last year he showed that he was an NBA ready body, but I think that he stayed at Indiana for one more year and refined his skills. And one of the biggest things that impresses me about Brian was he plays with a sense of energy and effort that you don't see on all NCAA teams. He is also a super unique player for his size, with his level of effort on both ends of the field. On both ends of the court. He was also a really good offensive rebounder at Indiana. He showed a lot of effort there, and I think that if you develop him even more, then I think that he can be a really great rebounder out of Indiana. So he also, for a big man, he was also a really fluid athlete. He worked well in transition and led that Indiana squad that had quite a few weapons. So I think that if you talk about him on the offensive end, I think that he really cemented his place at Indiana. If you look at his work on the offensive glass and being able to move fluidly without the basketball and move in transition, he showed his speed, and he's a really big athletic guy. So I think that he showed that he can move well and should use his strength and size to his advantage. So that's what I really admired about the guy. What was sort of your disagreements with that, Jackson?
Well, I think he definitely should have stayed in the draft last year because at his sophomore season in Indiana, he really regressed a whole lot. His field goal percentage plummeted. He went from, I think, almost 70% last year to this season. He was, I think, 51%. He went from, 68% last year to 51% this year. A lot of that regression comes with his two-point scoring. He was 70% last year, 55% this year. I I think a lot of that was him trying to show off his 3-point jumper, which he went 23 for 60 from out there, which some people say, oh, he shot 38% on three, but three more of those don't go in, and he's shooting 33%. So that's just such a small sample size. I don't think you can judge that at all. And then I understand what you're saying about him as a hard worker, and I liked watching him in transition. He runs the floor really hard, and he's got a good motor. But I think that doesn't show up in some areas. Like he's really a pretty poor rebounder. His rebound percentage this year at Indiana was just 13%, which is 13.7%, which is really low. Like that was like almost what Brandon Ingram put up while he was at Duke, and a lot of people complain about how unphysical Brandon Ingram is. So that's something I really didn't like to see. He's not a good jumper, and I think his value stats during his sophomore year regressed a ton. I mean, his net rating, his win shares per 40 minutes, his win shares, his box plus minus, all that got a lot worse his sophomore season. All that he really improved upon was that 3-point shot and then as a shot blocker. But he started turning the ball over a lot more. He was trying to do too much on offense. And his defense, he's got a lot of problems on defense. As a switch man, he's not mobile at all. He can't stick with guards. As a help defender, he gets caught in the wrong spot all the time. He doesn't really know what he's doing out there. His defensive IQ is very poor. I don't know. I just don't think he's athletic enough to be a good defender. I mean, the wingspan's nice and he's got some tools on offense, but I think that regression that he had scares me. He's not a good rebounder, so all I can really see translating for him is really that wingspan. I don't see a lot more that he does in the NBA game. I just don't think he has a very NBA tailored game, and that's why I've got him ranked lower than anyone else we've talked about. So I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of his.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that. I think that his regression. I watched him this year at Indiana, and I think that his regression this year was probably because he was, as you're saying, he was trying to do too much. He wanted to be a star on that team. I think that he was trying to force things where you talk about he was taking worse 2-point shots, and he was of course trying to develop and show people his 3-point range, which I think did get he developed in some ways, but I think that. Yeah, you're talking about when you're trying to do too much on the offensive side, then of course you're at risk at hurting your team and hurting your statistics. So I mean, I think that my pick was as one of those guys that could be a solid choice in the second round. I think that it was mainly because of his the potential that he showed at his during his freshman year and continuing into his sophomore year. I think his freshman year really blew us away, but I think that his sophomore year he showed that if you try and do too much, and I think that he should have took the money and ran and gone to the draft last year, but I think that he still has potential. But when you talk about what he did his freshman year, and I think that his sophomore year showed when you do too much, it's not always a great thing. But I think that if you look at what impact he made his freshman year and most of his sophomore year, I think that he still has potential. But you're talking about second round guys, so there's always a level of uncertainty. So I think that wherever he ends up, I think that he could develop, and you're not sure, but I think that he has upside.
Yeah, right. And then our last guy is he's a guy that has just been I've been freaking out about him since I watched his tape. I'm wondering what I'm missing because I don't understand why he's not a top 20 or even top 15 prospect. It is Jonah Bolden from Radnicki Basket. Spent a year at UCLA, spent 2 years at UCLA, coming out of Australia. He was redshirted a year at UCLA, and then he played last year at UCLA, but didn't have a very good season, so he went professional and went to play in Europe, and he has blown me away this season. He's 6'10", he's got a 7'2" wingspan, 227 pounds, and he's 21 years old. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's a good leaper. He can get up in the air, but he's also really fast in transition. He's got nice ball skills in the open floor, too. I mean, he can handle the ball really well for a guy his size, and he's got good passing vision in transition, too. He can hit guys in the corner. He can make nice dump passes. He's an aggressive rebounder. He's been a really good rebounder this season. On defense, he's got great feet. He moves around really, really well, and he's very active on defense. He uses that wingspan to his advantage. He can finish over and through defenses around the rim. He's not afraid of contact. And then when I was watching him, I was like, man, this guy's good. If he can shoot at all, then it's just a cherry on top. And he can shoot really well. He's shooting almost 42% from three this year with Radnicki on over 100 attempts. And his jumper looks good too. It's not just the stats; he's got good mechanics on it too. So, I mean, I was just watching him, and I was really impressed. I mean, and his stats the last couple months. I mean, he's only been getting better as the season has gone on. His last two games with Radnicki, he shot 11 for 14 from three in those two games, which that's really good, especially for a guy who's 6'10" and who's as athletic as he is. And he's put up. Let me check. He's put up 43 total points in his last two games on let's see 15 for 22 shooting, including 11 to 14 from three. So he's the only things that I could come away with that I wasn't impressed with was he's not a very good free throw shooter, and then at UCLA he didn't do very well his season in the air, and then he needs to add strength. But man, I was just blown away watching him. He reminds me honestly of like a taller Miles Bridges.
Yeah, man, I think he could be a diamond in the rough. I mean, he really stood out in international play, and I think that that was a great decision by him to move on from UCLA. I think that he showed a lot of range, making such a high percentage of his 3-point shots, and I think that he showed that he can be a prolific shot blocker and a rebounder, and of course he has great size. So yeah, I think that he can be one of those steals, man. I think that he has done really great things in Australia and showed how fluid and agile his game was there. So I think that he can pick up a big role in the NBA with any team that needs him. So I think that was a great find in the second round for any team. So that would be a fascinating pick for whoever gets him.
Yeah, I mean he really just blew me away when I was watching him. I was like, how is this guy not in the top 20 or even in the lottery? Like, I honestly might end up slotting him there in my next big board because, man, I was just so impressed watching him play. I'm sure some people think I sound crazy, but I have fallen in love with his game. I think he's going to be the next second round diamond in the rough that comes out of Europe, even though he technically came out of Australia and UCLA. But yeah, he's awesome. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, all those guys are great choices. I think that they all have something unique to give. But yeah, Jonathan Bolden really made a statement.
Bolden.
Jonah, sorry, John. No,
yeah.
Jonah.
You're good. Yeah, so that was the 10 guys we were going to discuss. Obviously, there are more second-round prospects. There are more guys. But these were the guys that really and we defined as second-round prospects as, who the people who cover the draft sort of have ranked in the second round pretty consistently, but that we chose to focus on them because we think that they're better than that. We think they might be first-round guys, and we think they might be diamonds in the rough out of the second round. So yeah, that was a good discussion talking about those guys.
Yeah, man. Just one final question: Who's your favorite second rounder in the NBA right now? Do you have a go-to?
Chris Middleton.
Okay, Chris Middleton. It's mine is the boy, young Whiteside, Hassan Whiteside, out of that, born in North Carolina. Let's go, dude. Oof, that boy mean.
Oh yeah, yeah. So be sure to give us a rating on iTunes, constructive criticism, whatever. It really helps. We'd love to hear what you have to say about our podcast since we're just getting started here on iTunes. We'll be back next week. Hope to see you guys soon. See you, Cesar.
All right. See you guys later.